For generations, farmers, homesteaders, and even soldiers in field camps have been closely watching the quiet workers beneath their feet. One of the most overlooked lessons in husbandry comes from a simple observation made across centuries. Worms flock to rotten cabbage far faster than they ever gather around manure. The scene plays out in old European farmyards, in wartime allotment gardens, and in rural settlements where survival depended on the fertility of the ground. This was not superstition or a quaint rural myth. It was repeated so consistently that it became one of the earliest signs of understanding how organic matter truly breaks down and what the soil's living engine prefers. When you throw a wilted head of cabbage on a compost heap and compare it with a pile of manure nearby, it becomes clear within days which one becomes a bustling haven of life. This single truth has helped gardeners rehabilitate dead soils, helped wartime farmers maintain productivity under rationing, and helped homesteaders today revive barren patches without relying on synthetic fertilizers. This video dives deeply into why this phenomenon happens and how you can use it in your own soil-building efforts, drawing from agricultural history, husbandry traditions, and practical farmcraft that has survived for centuries. The real reason worms target rotten cabbage faster than manure is, well, honestly rooted in biology. Worms respond to chemical cues, temperature patterns, moisture, and the softness of decaying materials. Rotten cabbage releases easily accessible sugars, amino acids, and sulfur-rich compounds that signal to worms and entire soil microbe communities that a feast has begun. These compounds diffuse quickly through the soil, moving farther and faster than the heavier, slower diffusing ammonia signal that comes from manure. As cabbage decays, its cell walls collapse rapidly, creating a naturally tender food source that worms can pull into their burrows without resistance. Manure, on the other hand, contains nutrients, but the nitrogen locked in it can be harsh in its fresh form. Historically, farmers waited months before manure became mellow enough for worms to approach. Medieval and early modern husbandry manuals warned that fresh manure could burn the soil or scorch the tender roots, and worms avoided such areas until microbial life had broken it down. Rotten cabbage, by contrast, starts mild and becomes sweeter to soil organisms over time. This makes it a magnet for early colonizers, especially compost worms and night crawlers, which are drawn to the rapid fermentation process that cabbage undergoes. Rotten cabbage builds worm colonies faster because microbes start the breakdown instantly. The moment cabbage begins to rot, bacteria and fungi surge into action. Historical homesteaders did not use scientific terms for it, but they recognized the speed at which soft greens disappeared. Microbial blooms raise the temperature slightly, not to the extreme of manure's hot composting, but enough to create a warm, inviting area that worms detect from underground. The more microbes gather, the more the worms follow. Worms chase microbial biomass as much as they chase plant matter, because microbes are a major part of their diet. Manure eventually undergoes a similar process, but it starts with far stronger bacteria, often high in ammonia, that create an environment worms actively avoid. Only after weeks or months do milder decomposers take over. This timeline has mattered throughout history. During wartime rationing in the 1940s, for example, victory gardeners buried rotten cabbage leaves directly into trenches because worms worked them so fast, while manure had to be aged separately. So, applying this knowledge to make your soil richer is really quite straightforward. One of the simplest ways to revive tired soil is to use rotten cabbage or, other soft brassica scraps as a worm primer. When working with a dead patch of garden, just cut the cabbage into smaller pieces, dig shallow pockets and bury the scraps lightly beneath the soil surface. Within a week, the worm population will begin congregating. After 2 to 3 weeks, those worms will have pulled much of that matter downward, loosening the soil and improving aeration. Another method is the trench composting approach that many pre-industrial farmers relied on. You dig a narrow trench through the garden bed, deposit rotten cabbage and other soft vegetables, cover it and continue planting on either side. Worms will gather in the trench, multiply and radiate outward across the bed. This historical tactic was used because it required no tools beyond a spade, no waiting for compost piles to mature, and no manure management. For homesteaders raising small livestock, manure can still be used, but pairing it with cabbage waste speeds up worm recruitment dramatically. Layering aged manure beneath a 6 to 8 inch layer of chopped cabbage leaves creates a transition zone in which microbes mellow the manure faster, while worms are drawn by the cabbage layer above. This trick was common in European small holdings, where every scrap of organic matter had to be used efficiently. Now, why does this matter for long-term soil health? Soil without worms behaves like a collapsed building. It becomes compact, airless, and slow to absorb water. Worms restore structure, and rotten cabbage is one of the fastest ways to summon them. Every handful of cabbage-fed worm castings delivers nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and beneficial microbes directly into the root zone. This is why Victorian-era estate gardeners deliberately fed their worm beds with brassica scraps before spreading the castings across rows and vegetable borders. By understanding why cabbage is such a powerful attractant, you gain a historical and practical advantage that reduces reliance on store-bought fertilizers. This method is evergreen because it works in any climate, requires no machinery, and relies on natural decomposition pathways older than agriculture itself. If you found this guide useful and want more deep historical explanations, practical husbandry strategies, and time-tested survival knowledge, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video with others who appreciate real evidence-based insights.